Hey, this is Andy Brown. In this follow along, we're going to take a look at Azure AI Studio or Azure OpenAI Studio. They're very similar, but they're also different. And so I want to make that clear distinction. So far, most of the videos that we've been doing programmatically, we just spinned up Azure AI services, or in some cases, OpenAI services, and we haven't really gone into that studio. But the studio is something that we should really know. And so I want to point out that we do still have our AI services we made from a previous video. I just go over here. And so we can technically enter the studio through here. Or if we created OpenAI, we could go here and we can get some of the functionalities of the Azure AI Studio. I recommend that if you're going to work with the studio, you go and create a studio resource first, because that's going to create all the stuff that we need to scope our projects and things like that. But I'm going to do it both for OpenAI and also Azure AI Studio, so that we can distinguishly or understand the difference between those two, because they look very, very similar, and they are very similar. But you know how Azure is; they like to do things 10 different ways, and it's always hard to know which is the most modern or best way. So let's first type in Azure AI Studio, or sorry, OpenAI Studio, and see if we get that. So we have Azure OpenAI, which is fine. And yeah, I guess that's the only way we're going to be getting into OpenAI Studio is by creating an OpenAI resource. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. So I'm going to create this one, just say OpenAI Studio. And we'll just choose East US, which is totally fine. Actually, I'm going to go West because some models are only available in West, and I don't want to have a hard time if that's the case. We'll say OpenAI Studio here. And then the pricing tier is going to be standard. I'm going to go and, oh, it doesn't like the name, so I'll put some numbers here on the end. And we'll go ahead and hit next, next, next. And we'll give it a moment here and hit create. So that one is creating. And now what I want to do is go over to Azure OpenAI Studio. Okay, so we type in AI Studio. And so notice it pops up as Azure AI Studio. So slight difference. We're creating the OpenAI resource, and then we'll launch the studio. And for this one, it's showing that it has the Azure AI services. But if you create from here, it's not just going to create just this resource. It's going to also create Azure AI Hub. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to create a new group here. I'm going to call this AZ AI Hub. Right, and this will be for the studio. I'll just put studio in there as well so we know what this is for. I guess we don't need random numbers. I'm just thinking that this is the name of the resource. I'm going to stick to West because I know that there are some models that we cannot use in other places. We ran into an issue where there was a model we wanted to use that wasn't available in West, so that was very interesting. But I'm going to go ahead here and just type in AZ AI Hub and put some numbers here so it doesn't complain. And that looks fine. So notice it says connect AI services included in OpenAI. And here it'll actually just make a new one for us. So when we actually do this, it's going to create both AI services and OpenAI. So we're going to have some redundancies there, and it's not a big deal. It just depends on what we spin up on the interior of those things, but they're not going to cost anything for us to spin those up as such. And so we'll wait for that to spin up here, okay? Well, and that was just the review stage, so we'll go ahead and hit create. They get me all the time like that, but we'll wait for that one to be ready, okay? All right, so both are spun up, and so remember, we have both OpenAI spun up and Azure OpenAI Studio with the hub. So if we click to this resource here, we now just have to wait a moment and notice it says Azure AI Hub. We'll go ahead and open that up there. And then over here, we'll go to the resource for OpenAI. And from here, we can open up OpenAI Studio. Okay, and so why do I say that I recommend that you create the hub first is that it just adds a layer of organization. So you can go into, if I go back here for a moment, we can go over to AI services right here, and we can click into here, and we can open this in the scope of Azure AI Studio, but it's not going to be in a hub. It's also not going to have OpenAI connected to it. So sometimes in Azure, there is an easier way to do things where it's going to set up a bunch of stuff. Some people like to set them all up individually and connect them. Um, but yeah, many times that doesn't work. So we're just going to do it the way that I know that will absolutely work for you. And you're going to notice that these look very similar. This is OpenAI Studio. This is Azure AI Studio. Azure AI Studio is newer. Technically, it's in preview right now, and the idea is that it's supposed to replace OpenAI Studio, or they're both going to be around in some regards. But the key difference is the model catalog. So if you go to the model, well, that's one of the key differences. If you go to the model catalog for OpenAI, the only stuff that you're going to see is the models that are from OpenAI company. If you go to Azure AI Studio and you go to the model catalog, you're going to have a much larger selection of models here, okay? So we have a lot more going on here. Now, I just want to point out that if you want to actually use these models, especially in Azure AI Studio, you may have to request access. So it's not showing me that here right now, but when I first used it, I had to request access. And so it would say request access here. You'd fill out a form and it would take 48 hours. It took me more than 48 hours. And they didn't tell me when they were available. They came back and I was able to use it. If you do not have access to those, you're not going to be able to do much at all. So make sure that you do that and you wait for OpenAI. I think when I used it, they were readily available. But again, if you have that issue, you might have to do that. So yeah, so they're pretty similar. I think that Azure AI Studio has more, but we're going to do as much as we can in the OpenAI Studio, and if we have to go over here, we can do that. But yeah, just flipping between the two, you can see, there are some additional things that appear not to be there, like prompt catalog. And all prompt catalog is a way of collecting your prompts. So it's just a place to save them. So if I click into here, it just shows an example of a saved prompt that we could use again. Okay, so yeah, hopefully that is clear. And so that is the initial setup, and then we will go in and start utilizing this stuff. Okay.